So, if you look at the people around you, there's a pretty clear pattern. Some of them have started businesses, creative projects, fitness routines, whatever, and some of them have spent the last 4 years saying they're about to. And the interesting thing is, it's not usually the less intelligent people who stay stuck. If anything, it tends to go the other way. The more someone understands about how hard something could be, the longer they spend in the preparation phase, which is a fancy way of saying they're lying on the couch, but with good reasons. So, I want to walk through the actual psychology behind why most people never start, not the motivational poster version, the real version. Because understanding it doesn't fix it, but it does give you something to think about while you're not starting things. The first thing to understand is what your brain is actually optimized for. And it is not optimized for achievement. It's not optimized for growth or fulfillment or building a life you're proud of. Your brain is optimized for not dying, which was a very relevant priority for most of human history and is significantly less useful now that the main threats are quarterly performance reviews and whether to text someone back. The technical term for this is the negativity bias. Your brain processes potential threats roughly 5 times more intensely than equivalent rewards. So when you think about starting something, your brain isn't weighing this could go well against this could go badly on a level scale. It's weighing them on a scale that was designed by someone who really did not want you to get eaten. The result is that starting anything feels disproportionately risky, not because it is, just because your brain is running software from 200,000 years ago on a problem that didn't exist then. I found the best way to work around this is to simply reprogram your entire evolutionary threat response system, which I am about to do right after I finish this video. Been meaning to get to that. The second thing, and this one's a bit more specific, is a concept called the planning fallacy. Basically, people are extremely bad at estimating how long things will take, how hard they'll be, and how many problems will come up. Even when they've done similar things before and know from experience that it always takes longer and is always harder. We know this. We do it anyway. What this means in practice is that most people don't avoid starting things. They start the planning of the thing, which feels productive and scratches the same psychological itch without requiring you to actually produce anything that can be judged. You research the equipment you'll need. You watch tutorials. You buy the journal. You make a folder on your desktop called Project Ideas and put one document in it that says Brainstorm and never open it again. This is not laziness. This is your brain very efficiently simulating progress while keeping you protected from the part where something could go wrong. I have 17 browser tabs open right now that together represent a business I have not started. They've been open for 6 weeks. The laptop fan sounds like it's filing a formal complaint.
Give me a break.
Now there's a third piece here, and it's probably the one that does the most damage. It's called identity foreclosure, and it works like this. At some point, you developed a story about who you are.
At some point.
Maybe you're someone who's good with people but not numbers. Maybe you're creative but not disciplined. Maybe you're smart but not lucky. Whatever the specific version is, that story sits in the background of every decision you make.
And your brain actively filters out evidence that contradicts it.
Because a stable identity feels safe, and an uncertain one feels like a threat. So when starting something new would require you to become a slightly different version of yourself, someone who ships things, someone who's visible, someone who fails publicly and tries again, your brain reads that as a threat to the self, which triggers the same threat response system we talked about earlier. Your own potential is, neurologically speaking, slightly terrifying. The fix that gets recommended here is to reframe your identity around the process rather than the outcome. Instead of, I am someone who wants to start a business, you say, I am someone who works on something for an hour a day. Smaller identity shift, less threatening, more actionable. I've been meaning to try this. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, this is interesting, but what do I actually do with it? And this is where most self-improvement content pivots to a 6-step system with a memorable acronym. I'm not going to do that, partly because those systems usually don't work, and partly because I haven't thought of a good acronym. What the research actually suggests is pretty unglamorous. The most reliable way to start something is to make the first action so small it feels almost insultingly easy. Not, I will write a chapter. One sentence, not I will go to the gym. Put on the shoes. The psychological barrier to starting is almost entirely about magnitude. The brain resists large, uncertain actions and barely notices small, certain ones. So you make the first action so small that your brain's threat detection system simply doesn't bother showing up. James Clear calls this the 2-minute rule. Other people have named variations of the same idea because it keeps being true and people keep not doing it. The other thing that helps, maybe more than any individual tactic, is accepting that the first version of whatever you start is going to be bad. Not bad in a room for improvement way. Actually bad. Bad in a way that you'll want to keep private. The gap between what you can perceive as quality and what you can currently produce is real. And it doesn't close until you've made enough bad things to get through it. Most people protect themselves from this by never making the bad thing, which is a valid strategy if your goal is to never make the bad thing. If you have some other goal, it is perhaps less useful. There's one more thing worth saying, and it's about the way we think about the cost of not starting. Because when people weigh up whether to begin something, they usually think about what they might lose by trying. Time, money, reputation, the comfortable story that they could have done it if they'd tried. That last one is particularly popular. It's much easier to protect the idea of your potential than to test it. But there's a cost on the other side too. It's just slower and quieter and doesn't show up all at once. It's the recurring low-grade awareness that you've been meaning to do something for a long time and haven't. It's the version of yourself you're carrying around that you haven't done anything with yet. That cost is real. It just doesn't send an invoice. The people who start things, not the people who succeed, just the people who start, are not usually braver or more talented or less afraid. They've just, at some point, decided that the cost of not starting is real enough to count, which is either a breakthrough moment of clarity or a particularly bad Tuesday, hard to say. It's a type of cause. So, to bring this back to the beginning, your brain is running threat detection software optimized for a world that no longer exists. It treats potential failure like a predator. It rewards planning over doing because planning is safe and doing is not. It protects your identity from change because change feels unstable. And it quietly lets you believe that starting tomorrow is roughly equivalent to starting today. None of this makes you lazy, it makes you human. The design is just not particularly well suited to making YouTube videos or writing novels or sending the email or building the thing you've been thinking about. The first step, as it turns out, is just the first step. Embarrassingly small, almost certainly imperfect, probably overdue, but it counts. There's a psychological phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain remembers unfinished tasks more vividly than finished ones, which means every project you haven't started is quietly occupying background processing in your mind. So technically, starting things is good for your mental clarity, your focus, and your long-term well-being. I'm going to go open some more browser tabs.
You can subscribe if you'd like. No pressure. I'll still be here overthinking.